Always got to have something to drink, you know? That kind of relates to what I want to talk about today. Welcome back to Be Rad at Something. I enjoyed doing the first podcast last time. I want to keep this rolling. I've been thinking a lot about what to do as far as a podcast and kind of what to talk about, and kind of drew a bunch of blanks. So today I went through the motions and got this all set up, and here I am. And while I was setting it up, I kind of thought about the topic. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about my AA program, because that is a pretty big foundation to all that I'm doing today. And this will also be what they refer to as a 12th step a little bit. That is sharing the message, the solution. And today I like to live in the solution as much as possible and be a part of the solution instead of the problem. I spent plenty of time being unrad at everything and part of the problem, internally and externally. You may know me as B-Rad, but I am also known as, hi, I'm Brad. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm also an addict. And for whatever meeting I go to, I always go to a men's only alcoholics AA meeting right now. And I identify as the alcoholic only in that meeting for the singleness of purpose, they call that. Because I respect that, I appreciate that, I understand it. There's a little bit of thing of pride too sometimes. You're like, you might be like, I'm an alcoholic and an addict and whatever. So for me, it feels like a good way to kind of calm that bit of pride down. Just to go to that group and fit into that group and talk about the solutions as they pertain to alcohol. And that's worked very well. The truth is, I'm addicted to almost everything I've ever tried and liked. So it doesn't really matter what the chemical is. And sometimes I wonder if drugs were a little bit less harmful to me. I mean, that's kind of crazy to say. Might sound crazy, but I don't know. Drugs kind of in my world were not exactly allowed, unless I'd kind of go off by myself with my chosen group of friends. But largely, a lot of times, I did drugs by myself. And they took me into a bad place too. I'm not gonna like be an advocate of how great it is or how less harmful drugs are. Not for me. I'd eventually probably end up in the same place. But yeah, see, there's my alcoholic mind already trying to convince me, oh yeah, drugs weren't so bad. Maybe you should try those again, or you could have done well on just those. Man, even sitting right here trying to do this, I get that thought. So let's put that in its place. No, none of those things. Not for me. And if you're an alcoholic or an addict, maybe you might have found this channel somehow because of the search for that or whatever. Be careful of that thought, I suppose. It's a good thing to tell you right now. But anyway, well, when I was 12, I drank. I stole some beers out of my dad's stash in the garage. But I still had this conscience. And the way my life was, my parents were always around at that time. I felt like, I better not drink more than 2 because I might get a buzz and then my parents would know. So somehow I never got drunk around that time. I just steal a couple beers, steal some cigarettes from my parents, go out and ride my motorbike up by my aunt's house in the woods, just kind of do my own thing. A few years later, I was in middle school and did what middle schoolers I knew did. We went out and we drank. We had older people to buy for us, and I remember starting to drink. Like, it was a big bear 40-ounce bottle of beer. I remember throwing that up after I finished it. I was had to be 14, somewhere around there. Next thing I know, I was waking up, like laying on the floor in the bed that I was sleeping in at the friend's house that night. It was just like, wow, how weird. I don't remember having doing anything fun at all other than that. But a blackout from the get go. And it's pretty wild too, because the older brother that bought this for us, he looked just like Hank Williams Jr. Man, the glasses, the hat, the beard, all of it. It was pretty wild. Like, in my mind, sometimes I still wonder, was that really Hank Williams Jr.? I don't know. No, probably not, but it's funny. So anyway, um, my drinking kind of stayed just, not harmful, but obnoxious a little bit. I remember one time I got to go to a party with permission, as long as I was to not drive. I had my license then, 15 years old. Like, okay. So there's a group of us all hanging out and drinking. Blacked out again on that one, but I did not drive. And, the next day was a horrible hangover. And fast forward a little bit to being 16, I moved away from my hometown and I didn't have the parental supervision. My dad had to stay back for a few months. My mom was working, and I met new friends, and that's what my new friends are up to, is going out and getting blasted, and that's just what I did too. I was going to do it eventually. It's just sometimes these little things are just in me to go do. My mom always said, you just had to see for yourself. It was one of those things I just had to see for myself. So all the conditions happened just right that I could go off into that pit of drugs and alcohol. And the alcohol evolved to marijuana, and the marijuana evolved to crank and crank meth, and later on pills, and it didn't matter. Those are all pretty scrambling substances, especially if they're not used as intended. And my brain and makeup, there's no way I can use those as intended. 100% abstinence is the best solution for me. But I went off far enough into those chemicals that was no easy thing to just swear them off forever. Matter of fact, I found it impossible, because I just go create my own problems, I guess. I had a pretty good life, better than I maybe deserved, but I would still go get all screwed up and then cause my own problems and make trouble. That's kind of funny. Some people have lives that are troubled. They didn't do anything to deserve it. My life was great, and I made trouble that I didn't even need. But I didn't listen to nobody or nothing. I just had my own ideas and wanted to do my own thing. That kind of serves me well today, but not along with any of those substances. So maybe that's probably enough about the story of my alcoholism. I did what I wanted to do. I wanted to go get completely screwed up. And I tried to enjoy my time, but it just never amounted to anything good for me. It just landed me in trouble. The drinking caused me a first DUI. And the story about that, real quick, I was at a party. I'd stolen a bunch of beer from my workplace, put it in my trunk, and drove to a motel where we were all hanging out. We were drinking on that. I was starting to see double, but it didn't end there. I drove to another place, another house. It was another party. We were actually playing board games and stuff. And then it came time to go home. And so I don't even remember getting in the car, but next thing I know, I'm pulled over on the street. There's a cop car behind me and there's lights flashing, and I was heading completely the opposite way from the opposite end of town of where my house was and didn't even know it. Just another blackout. Several blackouts for me. So first DUI got me to AA, and I guess that wasn't even the first time I went to AA. My dad knew I was in trouble. He was in law enforcement and thought maybe AA would work. So we went to the AA meeting hall, and I just went there I had to go there. I wasn't going to get out of that, but yeah, we sat around and talked about being an alcoholic, and I heard nothing that I should have while I was in there. Had a closed mind. So then I got that DUI when I was 18, a year later, and it was court ordered. So I've always been the type of person to kind of try to at least fit in with what the group's doing a little bit. It's kind of an oxymoron, right? I'm a person that does my own thing, but maybe not exactly. When I go to these groups like this, I kind of tend to do what the group's doing. Yeah, I realized I did that with the drugs and the alcohol too. Just have that when in Rome mentality too. When in Rome, you do as the Romans. Well, these Romans were drinking, and then these AA Romans and court people, they were saying I should try this program. So I could admit I was an alcoholic without even understanding what that really means. It's kind of a little bit knew I had a problem. And yeah, I fulfilled the court thing, got my license back in like 6 months, paid all the fines. Way too easy punishments for me. Right back out into it I went. Next time, 21 years of age, I was drinking. I thought responsibly at my cousin's, and wasn't really causing trouble. Time came to go home. I drove to my cousin's, but I thought, you know what, I'll walk home because I got a DUI before driving, and I'm not going to do that today. So I walked home, started walking home, I can't remember exactly how far, half a mile, probably a mile or maybe two back to my house. So I'm walking, and here comes some underage friends of mine driving around like idiots. They were squealing around and doing all kinds of dumb stuff. The one kid didn't even have a license. And they stopped. They're like, "Hey, you want to ride?" I'm like, "Okay." So I get in with them, and they squirrel around the corner, and I about fall out of the door because I didn't even have it latched. So we went on our way kind of towards my house, and we ended up on this off side street, just squealing around in the corners and all this stuff. And then we get pulled over, of course. And the driver says, "Hey man, switch me spots. I don't have my license. I don't want to get in trouble." So the hero drunk that I was like, "Okay, I'll switch spots with you." And then bam, I got the DUI for that. And we couldn't prove that I wasn't driving. Didn't matter. To me, that was the hand of God getting me back to where I needed to go. So back through the court system, AA, I picked it up a little bit more that time, and still just did what I had to do to get through it. And back on out. This time, I ended up maybe a little bit deeper into meth, to drugs, and all that nonsense. But the principles of AA to find God to help you out, I had done that. I remember I finally said the third step prayer where you turn your life over to the will of God. I said that prayer at that time and I was heard. I finally, that time in the middle, I was ready for a change. Like, yeah, I know what I'm doing is not working. I now am ready to try something different. So I prayed the third step prayer, and I remember the exact place I was when I did that. I was by myself, but it was unreserved. I was ready for anything. And I had this feeling begin inside of me where I knew I was heard. And I was praying to God, so I understood it was most likely God that just heard it. I didn't have a tough time believing in God. And the lights in the room got a little bit brighter. It was like, wow. And you know what? Those lights never dimmed back down. Anyway, I ended up getting tangled up into meth a little bit later. And every single day I was out in that, it was that voice of God saying, "Are you ready to come back yet?" And I'd have to say, "Nope." And then I'd continue on. The next day, God's voice inside, "Are you ready to come back yet?" "Nope." "Okay." Next day, "Are you ready to come back yet?" Finally, one day, I was completely depleted. I had stayed up for most of a couple months. I was just, I was at a new bottom. And that question came, "Are you ready to come back?" And I said, "Yes." And so I wasn't really out of the woods yet. It takes a few days to come down from such a place like I was. And I hallucinated and all kinds of things and kind of felt my guilt and shame but at the same time knew that I had to go sober up no matter what that meant. And so I made it down back down to the AA hall and nobody was there, but I tried. I was hallucinating. I wasn't ready for a meeting yet. And I ended up going back home. I kicked everybody out of my house. I didn't let anybody back in. I got some sleep. There was these people living in my house at the time and they kind of helped keep other people away. But then after a day or so, I kicked them out too. And I started going back to meetings. And then I officially hit it that time. And so I got some trinkets from there. I'll start with these. This time I worked the program and got some chips. So the very first one, 30 days, man, I was ready to get that one. I thought, yeah, I'm going to go get that chip and I'm going to feel different. Things are going to be wonderful. I got it and I felt nothing different at all. I was like, wow, what a disappointment. Yep. So getting to that 30th day, getting that chip, there was no big like orchestra playing, no grand celebration. It was a birthday meeting. There was everybody that was getting their chips and whatever at that time. It was all great. My mom made me a cake to share with everyone. She was there. My dad, my wife, Corey, who was my girlfriend at the time. Yeah. But I went home kind of a little sad. Like, that was it. That was a lesson to me in just being content and at peace with just how things are. There ain't going to be no giant burning bushes or claps of thunder. It's just another day, and the days are awesome for whatever they are. All right, so I got my 30, I got my 60, I got my 90, and I got my 6 months. And the 6 month, okay, so 30 was red, 60 was yellow, 90 was green, 6 months was blue, and then my 9-month chip was the first brass one, and my 1-year chip was another brass one. That was kind of interesting. That's all I made it as far as the program, and then I kind of stuck around a little longer. I got tired of going to the meetings. I had a sponsor, but it wasn't working out there. Didn't make it all the way through the steps, I don't believe. And I was going to church at that time, and I wasn't dealing with this alcoholic problem anymore. Wasn't admitting I was an alcoholic anymore. The people I was hanging around had no idea that I should be in meetings. We all probably thought church should be enough, right? Well, I drank again one day, and right back down I went. That's pretty much all I need to say about that. So that happened for another 10 years before I finally made it back. And at this time, I'm married and I have kids, and I'm sneaking off to do all these things, trying to do it in secret. I know people in my family knew. And once in a while, I'd slip up bad enough where, yeah, like I rode my motorcycle up like 80 miles away to this town in the middle of nowhere to a bar just to go drink and hang out up there. And they had no idea where I went, what I was doing, if I was alive. And I got a family at home, I got parents that love me, in-laws that love me, just everybody that knew, worried, sick. So it didn't matter. They go right back to the same trouble and place when I drank. But I made it back, and it's funny, but that wasn't even the last time, that episode. I finally had another episode where I was supposed to watch the kids at home while my wife went to go do her thing in Idaho, and I knew this was coming, and I had my drunk lined out. I was going to go get blitzed. I got some moonshine from a friend of mine that made some, and I drank that all in my own little garage. I was just out there doing projects, minding my own business, and blacked out and ended up disturbing the neighborhood and getting the cops called. And they told me I could just go sleep it off. And I told them, no, I don't like that idea. And so they said, all right, well, how about this? We're going to arrest you now. And I was like, no, you're not getting my arms. And so they kicked me, they tased me. They won. They always did. Thank goodness. Off to jail. My in-laws had to come get my kids. Wasn't able to be alone with them for 30 days. Wife had to turn around and come back immediately without doing her thing that she'd been waiting to do for so long. And here I am with this problem, confronted with it again. Corey suggested I go back to meetings to fix this. And I was finally at a place in my life where I agreed. All right. Playtime's over again. And we know this is an issue and we need to deal with this. So I went down to the meeting hall at a time I didn't think anybody would be there. And guess what? People were there. I got my big book, and I was hooked up with a sponsor, and I stayed, and I had a meeting. And that was June 25th, 2017. And so you remember these chips I was just telling you about? I had a red, kind of an orange yellow, a green, a blue, and that was the end of the colors. It went to brass. Kind of at the same time I a little bit gave up on the program or whatever happened. That's kind of how I think of it now. So anyway, I go to these meetings, and I went to them first, but I ended up being court ordered anyway later. And I made it to 9 months, and I didn't do any steps. I didn't know who to ask to do them. I thought in my head, see, I got lined up with this sponsor, and that turned out to be kind of, I'll just say that didn't work out. Kind of was off in the wrong direction. And I was thinking in myself, when I have thoughts in myself, I understand that God listens to them. And I was kind of thinking to God, I don't really want a sponsor to come find me, because every time that's happened, it's been a disaster. So I want to wait and pick the sponsor when the time's right. Well, I went 8 months or so with this, and I was starting to feel the misery that you feel just going through sobriety at first, because I had all these things I needed to get off my back. And then I finally had that thought after a meeting one day, God, I'm ready for somebody to come help sponsor me. And wouldn't you know it, somebody came up to me to do that. We went to a restaurant. We went through all the steps in a couple hours over lunch and some coffee. And I had this brand new spiritual experience, spiritual awakening as a result of that meeting. And it was exactly what I needed. And then I ended up joining up with the men's meeting, and I finally got my 9-month chip. I didn't get any chips until 9 months this time around, and this chip was purple. All right, so the significance of that is, Genesis, there's a rainbow, and it's God's rainbow. It's related to a promise that he says he won't flood the world again. Okay, so when I see rainbows, I think of God and all of that. So the chips, they started out red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, and that was the last one I got. And so here, over 10 years later, I'm back in AA. I'm really doing it this time, and the color is purple for 9 months. You don't know if you remember last time. When I got 9 months last time, it was brass colored. This time, the color is purple. That's in order with the rainbow colors that I associate with God. It was a God shot for me to know I'm in the right place. So I started back over collecting the chips at purple, and that's the last color, kind of the simple rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. You might add some more in there, but for me, for this story and for how I recognize it, it's the last color I was missing. So I have my old chip collection, and I started my new one at the last color. It was like, yes, you belong here. This is what you should be doing. And then I've gone on to get all the way up to V, 5 years. One day at a time, they say, and that's important. Every day is important. I had the count on the calendar, and I haven't added that for a while. I need to do that. I went through counseling and all the other stuff kind of as a court order, and then the only thing I do now is I go to AA meetings voluntarily. I understand how much I need them. When I don't go, it seems like a waste of an evening. I could have went and at least did that, So I've learned not to skip those. My work prevents me from going to the same meeting every week. But when I can, I go to this meeting. And yeah, I'm up to V as a result. 5 years. And then this following June, Lord willing, and if I continue to do the program, I can get the next one. And it's kind of cool too. I joined this men's meeting, and I got another little trinket. We went to a camp out, and I found an arrowhead. Just kind of another cool little thing that I keep. I like all these little shots that tell me I'm headed in the right direction. But this AA one is a big one for me. And now it's my turn to help out. So if you need any help at all, I know what works. I know how to take another through the program. I've taken a few through. I've had one get traction from doing it. And these steps, they're not so complicated. And I don't hold lordship really over a sponsee. I don't believe in that. I didn't like it myself. Maybe there's ones that need it. You need probably the kind of sponsor for your personality type that works the best for you. But for me, it's AA. It's going to actual church meetings that follow the teachings of Christ. And that's what I do today. And to me, it's God, the same God that's in both meetings. It doesn't matter. But they're two separate meetings. They're not different doctrines. They're just kind of reiterations of those doctrines as I need them in those two meetings. And I'm able to share things about maybe the spiritual side of AA and church. Maybe not like in an obviously, I name AA things in church, but I do name or share the spiritual experiences that kind of relate to both places and vice versa from church back to AA. I always talk about God in AA. And I hope if you're having problems that you can accept this God idea. That is where I initially started getting some traction. And today it's where I start every morning is with a prayer to God, like from the AA book, from the suggestion. I say, please God, direct my thinking, that my thoughts be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. That's right out of the book. And at night, before I go to bed, I think about my day in prayer. I apologize and ask for forgiveness for what I feel like I got wrong. I leave those troubles in that day. And I pray for forgiveness with the idea that when I wake up tomorrow, after I say that prayer, for God to direct my thoughts, I want to try a little harder at those things I failed at today. And I leave those things in that day, and the next day, those same things do come up, and I'm a little bit more aware, and I act a little bit better. Not perfect. Not perfect. See, I didn't even say perfect, but just a tiny bit better. A little bit longer fuse, a little bit less harmful words to others, a little bit less harmful thoughts about others. I said I have good luck kind of fitting into the group and just trying to be one of them. I find myself doing that. Like I just started a new job. I don't try to force my own personality right away. I just kind of see how everybody is, and I've been doing the mining work like I do for long enough that I'm one of them. I don't want to be better than anyone. I don't drink. That doesn't mean you can't. If you're not an alcoholic, if you are, then you shouldn't. And anyway, I know what works, and I can see the issues that some people have in their lives because of what they're doing. But I don't just go up and say, "Hey man, you need help. Let me help you." I end up in these places. I feel like God arranges it with certain individuals, and I tell my story. Got to tell it on the way home to one of my coworkers the other night. We drive vans back and forth. It doesn't matter. I've always found myself like there's always like a truck at work. I found myself one on one with these coworkers, and I tell my story. And doesn't mean I require them to do as I do. I just tell it. What I tell is the truth, as I've been able to discover over and over again, and what works for me. And I have this feeling that I need to share it. So I do. And that helps me stay sober. So if not another person gets sober or stays sober because of what I said, I'm getting it. Sometimes that's all I can do. It's what I need to do. It's what I am doing. I think that about wraps it up for today. Thank you for joining me on this episode number 2. And just keep trying to do this for you. Thanks. Have a good one. Be rad or be sad.